Smiley was under some fire recently for a situation involving PBS. PBS was his, well, you would say former employer, but actually he had a contract with them. He has his own production company. And he went to court with PBS after PBS let him go, accusing him of having sexual relationships with coworkers or with subordinates in his company. And so Tavis sued for racial discrimination. And after he sued, PBS countersued. And PBS, it looks like right now PBS won this round because the court ordered Smiley to pay no less than 1.5 million. So in order to further sort of understand this and understand what this means in the workplace, I reached out to my good friend, Nicole Price. Nicole is the author of the book, Lively Paradox. And she also has a lot of experience in executive coaching and training and leadership and things like that. So first of all, I'd like to ask Nicole, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Good to see you. So first of all, everybody who's watching, hit the thumbs up button when you come in the door. Also, please hit the subscribe and notification button and all that good stuff to help us grow the channel. So did you hear, Nicole, about what happened with Tavis Smiley?
I did.
Okay, and just for full disclosure, you've actually met Tavis.
I have.
Okay, and let's start there. Did any of this surprise you relative to what you knew in terms of meeting him and interacting with him as a human being?
Yeah, so just based on my lived experience, let me just say that it was approximately 20 years ago when I met Tavis, and I was alone with him for hours. And I was actually quite surprised at these allegations because at no point during that time with me did he do anything that I would deem as inappropriate, sexual or otherwise. Now, I will say that just because that was my experience, that does not in any way indicate that that would be everyone's experience, but that absolutely was my experience.
Okay. And, I think that one thing that's fascinating on this, Nicole, and I'm curious about this, is that when you have these portrayals of individuals who've been accused of something, and usually you're talking about a man who's accused of, something terrible like having sex or something. They tend to sort of focus on, women that he's known that are disgruntled, the ones that, that feel wronged by him for whatever reason. Why do you think that they don't take the time to actually talk to a lot of women? If it seems to me, if you want to draw an accurate picture, you talk to a lot of people and not just the people who have something negative to say, but also the people who have something positive to say. Do you think that that would make sense at all?
Well, what you're sharing is the difference between media spin versus accurate journalism. And what we are dealing with more and more in today's environment is media spin rather than accurate journalism. And so, that lends itself to sharing the message that people want to hear versus one that is unbiased and just shares multiple different perspectives and allows people to come to their own conclusion based on the information that they heard. Case in point, my mother was killed by a drunk driver. And at the time, the media outlets were interested in getting a statement from the family, particularly, my family. And one of the things that they were regularly looking for was anger and disgruntled talking points from family members. But for those of us who were wanting to talk about the system that had failed the assailant, no media outlet was interested in those talking points, and neither did they share those points of view.
Interesting. So they were looking for, so they had kind of what we in statistics, we call that selection bias, which is like, you're looking for the answer before you even ask the question. Like you will only accept an answer that fits the answer that you want to receive to a particular question.
Yes. It's called selection bias or confirmation bias. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder, and I thought about this with the Tavis thing. And really, none of us really knows much about Tavis's personal life in terms of what happens when he's, in the bed with anybody, whoever it is. So, did you think that this verdict, Tavis having to pay $1.5 million to PBS, do you think that this sort of, what does this say to men? Like, is this sort of some sort of warning that men should heed about sort of how we should carry ourselves in the workplace?
Yeah, here's what I would say, two things in particular, and this is related to all people who happen to be in leadership roles. First, if you are in a leadership role, it is not good practice to have sexual relationships with people who are in subordinate positions, period, full stop, regardless of if you are a man or a woman. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that if you are going to sue someone, be prepared with the data. Understand what the organization's legal requirements were of you upon employment, and make sure that you're well within the rights of those rules and regulations by which that company organizes itself, or even requires its employees to comply with. Because here's what I understood and read: that the organization had a clause that basically said leaders have a moral obligation to make sure that they are not engaging in sexual relationships. And based on my lived experience inside of organizations large and small, if you decide that you see someone within your organization that you want to have a consensual sexual relationship with, you then have to divulge that information. And the organizations that I've worked with are willing to make adjustments to organizational structure so that your personal life is not being hindered by your employment. So what does that mean? Boyce, if you had decided that you wanted to engage in a dating relationship with someone who was on our team, and you were the leader, I would put that person in a different division, or I would move you to a different division so that you all could engage in your personal affairs.
Interesting. Okay. Everybody who just came in, I'm speaking with Nicole Price, author of the book, The Lively, is it Lively Paradox or The Lively Paradox?
Lively Paradox.
Lively Paradox. And we're talking about Tavis Smiley and this really interesting verdict in which he was he's going to be forced to pay at least $1.5 million to PBS after they countersued in response to his suit for racial discrimination after they removed the show. The allegation against Tavis is that he had multiple sexual relationships with subordinates, and so this violated their morals clause. And so I want to ask you about this morals clause. When I was sort of reading it and trying to understand it, it seemed kind of vague. It almost seemed like something that you could pull out and use it if you want to, or not use it if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And also I was really curious, in light of the Me Too movement and kind of and they actually cited the Me Too movement as kind of the backing for all this. PBS, their attorneys mentioned the Me Too movement, which, some people like it, some people don't. I'm curious, have you seen any examples of women being taken down by the Me Too movement, by the morals clauses, any of that? Is it just that men are just inherently evil and we're the only evil ones in the workplace? Or do you think that there's some sort of bias here in which men tend to be the targets more likely than anybody else?
Yeah, I'm really careful about words. Evil and taken down are not words that I would use. I will tell you that especially in education, whereby women tend to be in higher leadership roles, you absolutely see women losing their jobs or being reprimanded because of their consensual sexual relationships with men in the workplace who happen to be their subordinates. Prior to the Me Too movement, this was absolutely a guideline by the Society of Human Resources Management. And so I know that people outside of business and industry and outside of large corporations feel like that this is a new phenomenon. It is not. We have been encouraged for at least 3 decades to make sure that there are not sexual relationships when people have reporting relationships. It's just not good practice. Now, the other thing that I will say, in addition to the fact that, yes, women who are in leadership roles find themselves in these same predicaments, because the other thing is men tend to be in the highest leadership roles versus women. If you look at the Fortune 500 companies in this nation, there are 500 companies of which only 35 women are on that list. And so while it might sound like men are the ones who are being held accountable to this higher standard of performance, what is actually more true, or as true, is that women tend not to be at the highest level of leadership in organizations. And so therefore it looks like it's weighted more towards men. And taken down. So while race is always an issue, you will never hear me say that race is not an issue. People who have Black skin understand, I believe, that every guideline, when when it is convenient to use that guideline against a person who is claiming racial discrimination, then an organization is going to use that guideline. That also is not new.
Interesting. Well, one thing I'll say that this is why I just really believe anybody that has a black son should train him to have his own business, just in case he wants to get away from corporate America. Because I don't really, I mean, you already have a major glass ceiling for black men, and this to me is it's something that says, I think we can all agree that you shouldn't sleep with anybody that you work with. When I went to Syracuse University, that was my father's advice. He basically said, he's raw. He said, don't fuck anybody on that campus. Anybody. No students, no faculty, nobody. So I would meet female faculty members who would come to the campus and work there. And I could tell they were interested in me, but I would say, no, I'm not asking her on a date. I'm not going to sleep with her. I'm not interested. I'm not moving in that direction at all. And I think that where the paradox comes in for people is that there are some people who work a lot. They spend more time at work than anywhere else. And so I wonder how natural it is, in a world where people are, workaholics, like Tavis, was a workhorse. That's why he was so successful. People who are workaholics, working all the time, working with people of the opposite sex, and you work hard, which means you rise up the ladder. So you're going to have a position of power and authority. Also, if you're a powerful man, women are going to be attracted to you. Women are going to hit on you. They're going to lead you on. They're going to ask you, or when I say lead you on, not to the point where they're manipulating you, but to the point where they're letting you know, hey, I'd like to pursue something else. I wonder how fair that is to ask people who are spending the majority of their life at their job to never, ever have any sort of physical interaction or whatever social interaction with anybody they work with.
Yeah, so multiple points there. It's a good practice. I started my own business, right? I have my own leadership development company because I was tired of running into the glass ceiling. And what I'd love for the entrepreneurs on this podcast to understand that it's still good practice for you in your own organizations to discourage people who have reporting relationships to engage in consensual sex, which takes me to your next point, which is it natural? That's why no organization is telling you that you can't have consensual sex. They're telling you that if there's a reporting relationship, you then have to divulge it so that we can remove the reporting relationship. Because what you don't want to ever be is you don't want the appearance that someone is being forced into a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting to me is that it seems to me like you could almost make the other side of that argument as well, right? That if you initiate a relationship with a superior, you would end up giving the appearance that you slept your way to the top, right? So it would almost seem to me that if we're going to incentivize or punish, superiors for pursuing relationships with subordinates, we should also punish subordinates for pursuing relationships with superiors.
Yeah, you and I have had this conversation before, and there are social power structures. And when someone's at the other end of a social power structure, the entire analogy kind of falls apart. And here's why. If I decide that I want to sleep my way to the top, and even if that is my choice, it is my choice. When you flip the power, there's no way to know if the other party is doing so because they want to, or because they feel like they have to. And that dynamic just does not occur in the reverse.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Let me hear your
what if a woman says, I'm going to sleep my way to the top, and she goes to a man. I know a guy this happened to, and she says, I want a piece of that, whatever. And he said, no, I'm not interested. But they were friends. He got the impression that if he did not sleep with her, she was going to go tell a story. She was going to go create a narrative, because the problem with these cases to me, Nicole, is that they don't look for any proof or evidence in terms of what actually happened, who initiated what. I think that if we're going to do this, right, if we're really going to do this thing where we're policing people's sexual behavior and controlling people's choices in terms of who they sleep with, then I think we got to do it thoroughly. That means that if I'm going to investigate, if you're accused and I'm investigating you, then I'm going to also investigate the accuser just as much as I investigate you, because I need to figure out who's the accuser and who's the victim, right? Or sorry, you know what I mean? Who's the victim and who's the predator, right? Yeah. Because I know men. I'm just speaking on behalf of the good men I know who've been, caught up in situations that they didn't ask for, because women are smart. Women are not powerless. And I just really think that there's no conversation about that. How do you? I knew a guy. I'll give real life example. I put it on my grandma's grave. This is a real story. Meets a girl, a woman, and they're not working together now. But they sleep together. She texts him the next day, says, "Hey, let's get together." He says, "I'm sorry, I'm busy." She texts him again the next day, says, "Hey, you got time today?" He says, "I'm sorry, I'm busy." And the third day, she texts back, "You raped me." Right. And then she starts sending emails to everybody they know, all their joint colleagues. So they did business together, saying, "He raped me." And he was like, "How did we go from let's spend time together to you raped me?" And he's furious. He goes to the lawyer. He's like, "I'm suing. I want to sue because she's ruining my reputation." And the lawyer said, "No, don't do it. Don't." Almost like the way they tell rape victims, don't report it, because if you go and you fight this, it's only going to get worse for you. It's going to be expensive. It's not going to work. They're going to, like, so what about justice for the men who really don't want to harm anybody, who just want to live?
So, excuse me, I feel like there's parts of the story I don't have. So he did not meet with this woman.
Oh, he did meet with her. Oh, yeah, they had. Oh, they got it on. Let's be clear. They got it on. Yeah, that's what he told me. He said, "Yeah, we slept here." Now, here's the thing. They didn't work together, so it's not a perfect analogy to what we're talking about, right? But they worked together without working for each other in a subordinate, superior kind of situation.
Yeah. So the engineer in me always kind of gets stuck when we change multiple variables. Let's go back to Tavis Smiley. Mr. Smiley did admit that he had sexual relations with people who were his subordinates. There
Yes.
didn't need to be an investigation. He violated the clause. It just in the same reason that your father told you not to sleep with anyone on that campus. I struggle because a man of Tavis Smiley's stature, who is responsible for the state of Black America for over a decade, he is politically savvy. He understands this game. To then lose the game when he knows exactly how it happens. And in the case of a person who is working with people, because I think we sometimes leap too far the other way. You've also heard me say this. The Me Too movement is not about consent. It's not about consensual sexual relationships where there are no power dynamics at play. That's not what it's about. And so the Me Too movement, which was designed to protect people who were being asked to sleep their way to the top. That's what the movement is about. We can change the narrative all we want. That doesn't change the fact that that's what the narrative was about. That's what it was about. How then can we say that proper investigation wasn't done when Mr. Smiley himself says he violated the clause? And I just don't understand what legal counsel would advise you to sue your employer when you know that you violated the clause.
Well, I will say this. I'm gonna say that my perception of the Me Too movement when Tarana Burke started it was, she said, what I recall reading, her saying is that she started it to protect the little Black girls who were getting into the R. Kelly situations, and all the predators in the hood that are going after the young girls. I think that it became the corporate thing, and consensual sex got thrown in there later on. I felt like it was initially about rape and about, these clearly inappropriate, situations. I think when you get to the point where men are being sort of persecuted for consensual sex, and I do believe it's a man thing. I don't see a lot of public cases of women being taken down from it. I see it as a gender war. I really do. I see it as we're really just pissed off that men are in these leadership positions. So we're going to find the thing that they do the most, which is sex. Men are sexually, women and men are both sexually driven, but men perhaps a bit more than women in certain contexts, right? And I just feel that they're sort of saying, okay, we're going to criminalize sex, but we're only going to do it if you're a man. If you're a woman who tries to sleep your way to the top, there's no penalty for you for even trying to seduce. Like I really think that if you're going to be fair, you would spread it all the way around. That if because all the burdens. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is not about equality. This is about equity. And so I will call out again that men tend to be the ones in the leadership roles, which is why you see what you see. I don't specialize in arguing about opinions. I specialize in disagreeing about facts. And so while your lived experiences might be different from mine because of your involvement, especially with mostly Black businesses and mostly entrepreneurial businesses, I'm not even going to say I disagree. I can't disagree with facts. the clause that states that it is not appropriate to sleep with your subordinate predates the Me Too movement by more than 30 years. I'm not sure where this narrative is coming from.
I think the narrative came from the fact that they're citing the Me Too movement, right? But you're right, though. I definitely concede that point, right? That if Tavis signed an agreement saying you cannot sleep with people you work with, and he violated that agreement, then there's no more discussion in terms of whether or not he technically broke a rule, right?
And let me tell you how pervasive this is. Every year for the 13, almost 15 years that I worked in corporate America, you had to go through the contents of the ethics and standard clauses every year, read it all, and sign that you saw it. I just am having a hard time believing that we're not aware of what the corporate rules are around fraternizing with your direct reports.
Mm. Well, you can't argue with that. I mean, that point is correct. I mean, that's that's one of the reasons why I don't think. First of all, I have an issue with that rule just in general. I just think it's not realistic. I think people have sex. Human beings have been having sex for 100,000 years. Since there have been human beings, people have been having sex, and we can sort of decide.
Have sex with everybody outside of your organization. I mean, why are we acting like the 200 women you work with is the only pool you have available to you?
I don't disagree with you. I think that's perfectly logical.
Sleep with somebody at church. Sleep with somebody in your local Jack and Jill organization. Find somebody at the laundromat. Well, I mean, I don't. That's where I'm just like,
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. Again, I think that's logical. That's what I did when I was at Syracuse. I would not date anybody that I worked with, even no matter how much I had in common with you. You could be another black professor that I thought was very attractive.
Yeah,
you're off limits. I think the challenge was that, if I'm a black man, I live in a place like a Syracuse. Most of the intelligent black women I meet are women that I work with, right? And so so that creates a dilemma, right? So I think that's the problem, right? That when you talk about the elements of human attraction, the way God built us, he didn't build, our bodies and our minds and spirits are not built to know when it is and is not appropriate to be attracted to another person. Maybe if you're talking about a relative or something, yeah. But, people get attracted to each other. That you're working with somebody 30, 40 hours a week. You got all these things in common. You're achieving goals together. You're getting closer as you're working together. I just, it's not to say that I think it's a wise decision to fraternize. I just think that when it does happen, the question is, should that person be really just hung out to dry? And
how about that person should divulge it? That's what is being asked of you, to divulge it. Here's where I think you and I do see things the same way. When we include race, our history and our stories include the Emmett Tills of the world, men who he was a boy, who've done really nothing. And yet when somebody says that they've done something, it could mean death. Whereas on the other side, for our white colleagues, if we're just going to talk about white people, when white people say things, people believe them, especially when white people are upset or emotional and cry, people believe them. And we can use the same Emmett Till story. And so we do run kind of parallel paths that don't really see the world the same way when we look from a historical perspective. That's where you and I absolutely agree. What I am interested in knowing from you is, what is the solution that would then prevent people from being in situations? Because I can tell you from my lived experiences and from most of the women I know that they have been given these ridiculous propositions in order to be able to get opportunities at the table. So what is the solution then to help us have more of an equitable playing field when we're talking about gender, if we don't have these clauses that try to make sure that power is not at play?
I think that if you want to talk about it from a practical standpoint, clearly it's a matter of just knowing the rules of the game that you're playing, right? If you're in a space where these sorts of interactions are not allowed, then just as a fundamental point of decency, leave that off the table. Like, so, I go and I hire the babysitter in my house. I could be a creep and offer her some indecent proposal, but I don't do that because I know that's not appropriate. I know that I shouldn't do that. Now, I think that from a reality-based standpoint, the challenge comes in that, men that have power are just more attractive than men who don't have power on average. And, and I think it would be naive to presume that all of these relationships or all these interactions occur in one direction, right? That, that it's always a guy who says, look, I can take you to the top if you sleep with me. I think that there are lots of situations that should be acknowledged where someone says, hey, if I sleep with you, will you get me to the top? And I think that if one proposition is considered indecent, then all propositions should be considered indecent across the board.
Yeah, I think you and I are just talking about different things. You're talking about equality, and I'm talking about equity. And equity would say that those two things are drastically different. If I want to be a prostitute, if a man wants to be a prostitute, he wants to be a sex worker. That's his prerogative. He's consenting. Consent is the difference here. And you cannot you cannot validate or be sure about consent when power is going the other way versus when I am deciding that I want to sleep my way to the top. We know for sure that I have consent. It's kind of like when people suggest that Sally Hemings was Thomas Jefferson's mistress. She could not say no. So that's the consent. I
think the Sally Hemings Thomas Jefferson analogy doesn't work because we're not talking about slavery, right? We're talking about corporations where I don't owe you a job, right? I don't owe you an opportunity. I don't owe you anything, just like you don't owe me sex, right? Like a man can't say, well, I felt pressure to give her the job because she told me that if I don't give her the job, she won't give me the sex, right? And I needed the sex, right? But
you do realize that happens.
Well, men might say it, but it's not true, right? No, a woman doesn't owe you sex. And a man doesn't.
But I can tell you that I've had at least 2 contracts that were canceled when I refused to sleep with a man.
Right. So here's the thing, right? That's the question. I'm not saying right or wrong, and I don't want to make that personal because I don't want to even imply that I'm.
Well, I'm just trying to see where you're going. Where
I'm going is that in the real world, in life, people make trades all the time. That's my point. Right? People make, so for example, let's flip the gender so it doesn't become a sexism kind of thing. Let's say that I meet a woman and I want a contract. I want her to hire me for a job. And she says, I'll hire you if you sleep with me. And I say, well, that's not fair because you're forcing me to make an impossible decision. I feel coerced. No, some people will say, well, Boyce, then you make a decision. Either give her what she wants or go get a contract somewhere else.
Okay, and so you're saying you subscribe to that idea?
I'm not saying I subscribe to it. I'm saying.
What are you saying? Because it sounds like you subscribe to that idea.
I'm not subscribing to it. What I'm saying is that that's reality, right? What I'm saying is that it would probably sound
silly. It's reality that people rape children. That doesn't mean that we make that okay.
Right. I didn't say it was okay. We talking about raping children. I don't talk about that. But what I'm saying is that
the reason I bring that up is because high school teachers have sex with high school boys and women. And then we try to act like, oh, well, what boy didn't want to sleep with her? No, people have the ability. Why are we talking about humans like it's the Stone Ages? You have the ability to think beyond what your private parts are telling you. And I think that's kind of also maybe one area where we disagree. I believe people have the ability to think. Just because your penis is telling you, oh my God, I want that woman, your brain is more powerful.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but let's just be real. People make bad decisions over sex all the time. Just like women make bad decisions over love. Women aren't usually going to make bad decisions for something physical. They make something that usually on average, not the stereotype, but maybe it sounds like but I don't mean to do that. But a lot of times you'll see, how many times do you see women make bad decisions because they were in love with a man? Like seriously, it happens all the time, right? And so my point of the matter is to say that while we certainly can agree that your love for a person shouldn't cause you to make an irrational choice, but people do. And we should also agree that your penis shouldn't lead you to make an irrational choice.
And
But
so
it
when
happens.
women make irrational choices based on love, if we're going to use that analogy, everybody's like, she's just stupid. So when men make irrational decisions based on sex, they just stupid. You
That's true.
cannot shift this narrative.
No, no, no.
So when
I agree.
people
I
make
agree with
stupid
you.
decisions,
I
they make
agree.
stupid decisions. And when you make stupid decisions that cost you $1.5 million, I'm sorry.
There you go. And now that I will agree with. I will agree with that. Tavis Smiley got some expensive sex, and that's what it is, right? And I think that
When there are at least how many women in this world you think would have slept with Tavis who probably looked better than those ones that he was sleeping with, or maybe had more credentials, or were smarter, or were willing to do incredible work with him? I mean, come on, the brother was not at and on shorts in terms of opportunities. Like, come
yeah,
on, man. Mm-mm.
they do say that a requirement for leadership for a man is to the ability to have sexual discipline. Like if you don't have sexual discipline as a man, it's going to be hard, or really as a woman or anybody, right? It's tough to lead, and I do agree, and I think that where I can empathize with or the reason I'm seeing these other or laying out these other points of view is because a lot of people don't see it from Tavis's position. I have a little bit of an ability to see it because I've been in that space where people come at you in certain ways, and it's almost like doing kung fu and calculus at the same time, because you're trying to figure out who's trying to manipulate me, who's trying to use me, who's trying to get close to me so they can go tell a story, and it's really difficult. So part of me empathizes with what Tavis went through. I don't think that this. I think that if they had not fined him 1.5 million and taken his show and ruined his reputation, I think that would still have been okay. I feel that Tavis made a mistake, right? Tavis did some stuff he shouldn't have done. See, he did some stuff he probably regrets. But I think the fundamental question to me is, did he deserve to lose it all? I mean, because his brother lost. I mean, he's losing all his money, his reputation, and his show. He lost in his power. He lost everything. And I just think that in a world where a lot of people make mistakes due to sex and love and all that, I don't know how. I don't know if I can agree with that.
Yeah. So let's be clear. I tend to be. I feel like people should lose it all because they've made a mistake. In fact, I tend not to think that, just as a point of my personal constitution. What I will say is, I'm not sure what legal counsel and sue his employer, because the $1.5 million number came as a result of his lawsuit. So it's like, okay, no harm, no foul. Let's everybody just walk away. And you want to keep it going. And I get it. We're like, I want to leave with my reputation intact. I have been sued. You and I have talked about this. Just because somebody sues you doesn't mean that you were wrong. And I understand what it feels like to kind of fight it in court. And I also understand what it looks like to know when you're going to lose. And sometimes we will allow our emotional, and using your term, our personal opinion about things to get in the way of what it logically and reasonably makes sense. Do you as an individual want to go up against an organization when you know you signed a clause and you want to sue them when they have their money is as long as I-70 and yours is not? I would say that that's probably not the best idea. I understand that. I would also say that what I empathize with is, I do not believe that where we've gone in this world, in our cancel culture, is going to be healthy for us in the long run. We have gotten to a place where when someone makes a mistake, we want to completely obliterate them. And my time in the church has taught me that almost everyone has done something that if we put a camera and a nice clear lens on it, that you wouldn't want your entire life under the microscope of public scrutiny. And so with that, what does it look like to practice restorative justice, to have conversation, to allow people to apologize and make amends? And what does it look like to allow people to move on without completely ruining them? Because there are certain parts of this that I would say, what does the world lose because we don't know how to allow people to find their way back? And regardless of where you are from a religious standpoint, I think the work that Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam have done in order to help people understand the importance of discipline. There should be no group of people that are more disciplined than us. When we are not disciplined, it can mean death. And so it's interesting to me that that there are people who are able to get to such high levels of leadership and would allow the lack of discipline to be their downfall. I'm just, it's shocking, especially once you get to a certain age. Not that I can expect more of the likes of a Tavis Smiley or the likes of you, but I will tell you that my heart expects more. My heart expects far more discipline.
Yeah, you would hope so. You would hope so. Maybe what we can agree upon for sure is, and everybody give me a yes or no in the chat if you agree. I believe that Tavis can be forgiven for having consensual sex with women he worked with. Give me a yes or no if you think Tavis can. If you think Tavis can and should be forgiven. Do you think there's room for forgiveness for Tavis? What do you think?
We need to stop calling it Me Too if he and the ladies involved consider it consensual. I think it's a violation of the organization's contract.
Okay.
If you violate your organization's contract, you get fired.
There you go. Okay, so there we go. So that's the point of agreement, that he did violate the contract. If it's in writing and it happened, then there's a violation, and also there's room for redemption and forgiveness. And I'll just say this, I've always respected Tavis. I haven't always agreed with him, but I respect him.
No, you didn't always agree.
No, I have not always agreed with Tavis.
I think those of us who follow you regularly, I think we all know.
Yeah, I haven't always agreed with him. But with that Obama thing years ago, I didn't agree with that. And I think also, I think we just got to be careful as a society when we're talking about how we regulate sexual behavior. Because I'll tell you, if you go into the LGBT space or any other space, you're going to see a lot of people doing things that they wouldn't want everybody else knowing about. And I think that as long as we're fair in terms of how we penalize that, then I'm okay with it, but when I'm only seeing brothers going down or whatever, like it kind of bothers me. I don't,
Yeah, and I just invite you to just broaden the network a little bit, because you think that only brothers are going down, and that's just not what it's looking.
But that's all we seeing. That's all we seeing, especially when you talk about the Oprahs and the Gales, and you got Michael Jackson, then Russell Simmons, then Kobe Bryant, and then Bill Cosby. I mean, really. And with all the debauchery going on in Hollywood, that's all you can come up with? Really?
Yeah, and I would just say, too, that sometimes we feel like we know celebrities because of their fame and the way that they let us into their lives. And I just invite all of your listeners to really just look around with the 10 to 12 people that they work with every day and find the truth or the lie in their lived experiences. Because it's really easy to kind of look out there and say to those famous people, how dare you? But I invite us all to think about when we're making decisions every single day in our lives, what would it be like if it ended up on the evening news? Make the best decision based on if your mother was standing there watching, or if your spouse were there watching, or if your girlfriend were there watching. What decision would you make then? And I think people sometimes would make very drastically different choices. And we see that all the time. And it's just like, at what point do we own our part in this? And I'm not saying there's not a system set up against us. This entire system is set up against us. And if we're going to survive in this system that's set up against us, what can we do to make sure that we're not giving people bullets for the gun?
Well, there you go. Well, I have nothing else to say. So thank you for this analysis, Nicole. I appreciate a nice, fun, healthy debate. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching. By the way, here's how you spell Blag Enough, in case you haven't looked it up yet. It's Blag
Enough.
This is
Tell me more about Blag Enough.
It is our social media platform, because we are sick of Facebook and we want a backup, a plan B in case Facebook shuts everything down. So we created Blag Enough. So you can go to blagenough.com and sign up. So if you're Black enough, join Blag Enough. But if you're not Black enough, then you may not want to be there, because the conversations are super black. So it's for all the people that are black, blickety black. But there's no
blackety black.
Yep. You gotta be, to get in, you gotta be blickety black. You can't just be black. You gotta be blickety black. All right. So, so thank you very much, Nicole Price. What's your website?
Livelyparadox.com.
Okay, livelyparadox.com. She's the author of the book, Lively Paradox. So everybody go check that out. Also, hit the thumbs up button, please, before you go. Also, make sure you subscribe. And don't forget, this weekend, we're doing our online business summit. We're going to talk about real estate for 2 days. Go to theemancipationequation.com if you'd like to join us for free. It's theemancipationequation.com. So feel free to go to that URL. Just type it in. And oh, wait, I couldn't type it in. Somebody type in theemancipationequation.com for me and put it in the chat. All right, guys. So take care. And thank you again, Nicole. I appreciate it. And everybody have a good day. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.